It's time for my annual AMA. It's Ask Me Anything, and I'm going to be answering your questions now on coffee and trains. Hey everybody, my name is Jimmy. I am drinking some Arabica bean coffee, and this is Coffee and Trains.
This video is brought to you by Model Railroad Academy. Model Railroad Academy is your online resource for model railroad instructions, ideas, and information, with loads of tutorials and articles for model railroaders of every skill level. I've recently been going through their catalog and watching some of their older videos, including this one from Don Kassler and the M&K division of the B&O. It's been really cool to watch and see all the old techniques he used. Plus, you can find tutorials on everything from bench work to electronics to scenery, all sorts of things there. Go to the link in the description and you can get your first full year for just $1.49. That is for new members only.
If you want to tell me what kind of coffee you're drinking and maybe be featured just like these guys right here, you can do that in the comments below, and who knows, you might see your name pop up on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Also, this is my monthly Q&A. If you want to know how to get your question answered in the next Q&A, I'll have that at the end of this video. Cheers, guys. Spot68 says that he has a DCC-EX CSP1, which is their pre-made DCC base station. And he has both the main track and the programming track plugged into it. And he says his programming track is doing its job. When he tries to run locomotives on the main track, he's getting nothing. He said, can the main track and the programming track run together on the same DCC? And if so, where would you recommend looking for the solution in engine driver? So here is the first thing that I would double check. So, because this is the thing that threw me off about the CSP1, is that the positions are actually reversed in comparison to if you built your own with the motor shield. So make sure that you're in the correct connection, because that can be really weird. But it doesn't sound like that might be the issue. So what I would do is I don't think I've had that issue with the CSP1 yet. But I need to try and replicate it. But a couple things that I would try is there's actually a separate DCC-EX programming app, and I cannot remember what it's called. I will put the title right here. But it is something that you might want to try. Or you can also, if you're using that app, you can also just try programming everything in engine driver. But I have not run into that issue specifically. But the first thing I would try is that separate programming app, and if you're using a separate programming app, do that. So not quite sure. Also, just double check your programming. I have done that and gotten extremely frustrated and realized I just did one number off on the engine, and that was the issue. So, but yeah, I haven't run into that specific issue, but if I have an update, I will try to figure it out and see if I can replicate the issue. Engage the Trains asks an interesting question. He asks about what are the ways to capitalize on train models as far as selling trees, tunnels, and potentially full layouts. Is there a market for that, or what convention sells high-end layouts? So I think there's a niche market for everything, and what it really comes down to is that if you make a good product and you show people enough of your good product, people are going to want to buy your product, for whether it's trees, tunnels, or all that kind of stuff. And then it just really comes down to marketing, whether you're discovered on YouTube, or you take stuff to train shows, or you post it and people find it on Facebook and things like that. So that is probably the main way. In terms of full layouts, I don't think there's a huge market for it, because part of the hobby is building the layout itself. But there are people that I've talked to on multiple occasions that would buy a full layout pre-built, and if I was selling something like that, I would build like small dioramas and small layouts that I could travel and take them to conventions to display, because you're going to have people there that might be willing to take your card and connect with you, or things like that. There are places that sell entirely pre-built layouts, so there's obviously some people that do that. And I've had some advertisers on here for trees, like scale trees. But tunnels and potentially full layouts, you can definitely get a cottage industry going for like this. And some places that I would potentially try were like Etsy would be a good place to try, because they can handle a lot of your search engine optimization. So, but yeah, it's a bit hard to say because there's no real hard data on that. Yeah. Lars Buscher asked a question about signals. He said he is fascinated on controlling signals based on the position of Kato turnouts and he's not great at soldering wires to the track, and he was looking for alternative solution, and he doesn't want to do Arduinos. Well, lucky for you, I have done an entire video on just that. The signals that I have right here, I don't have my layout on, are powered by the track and change by the way that I throw the turnouts to red or green. So that video I will link right up here, as well as in the description and at the end of this video. Steel Style Shots Photo asks and says that he is trying to get back into model railroading. He used to be into it as kids. He's now in his 50s. And he's heard great things about Kato, but their HO scale offerings are limited, and he wants to do HO. So he's trying to ask what the recommendation is for this. Well, I think one thing you can definitely do is a starter set. And with starter sets in HO scale, you can definitely look at things like Bachmann. If you want to do DCC, Bachmann does have a couple solid DCC starter sets. Now, there are a few brands that I would recommend for doing this. I think pretty much most of the big ones are good now. Bachmann, Athearn, and Walthers are going to be your good starting brands. They have good multiple tiers. Atlas as well is another one that's going to have good options for that. You're going to want to look into, once you get into it a little bit, you'll start looking at things like scale trains, tangent, and all of those types of brands that have the more detailed options. But if you're looking for a good place to start where you're going to have solid running options, Bachmann, Athearn, and Walthers and Atlas are going to be where you start. You're going to be able to find some good options there that are right in the middle of road of pricing, and you're going to be able to get some solid rolling stock, and you can definitely get track from them. So that's where you're going to really be able to start. But in terms of starter sets, if you want to go DCC, really your only option is going to be Bachmann. That's what I did when I came back into the hobby, so that's one place to look. With Bachmann, if you want to do Easy Track, do try to do their nickel silver Easy Track, which has the gray road bed. The nickel silver rails do better than the steel alloy rails that are on the Easy Track with the black. So that's one thing to look at. And then when you're looking at track among those, Walthers and Atlas have non-roadbed based track. I think they have roadbed based track too. But really the best options they offer are ones without a roadbed. So to start off, Bachmann, Athearn, Walthers, Atlas. Those are your four that are going to have your mid-tier options. Then when you really get the hang of it, you can step up into something like scale trains. You can step up into something like tangent, but those are really high-end models. And Bachmann, Athearn, Walthers, all of them, they have a high-end tier. Athearn has Genesis, Walthers has Proto, like those type of brands. So I would start with those low to mid tiers, but don't go really, really cheap, because I try to tell people this is like, you don't want to go to the dirt cheap option because you want to have a good first experience. So say what you want. I know people have bad taste in mouth in Bachmann in the past. It's not really there anymore, but Bachmann starter sets are really a great gateway into the hobby, and then you can also mix in with all the other ones. They're all compatible. And the Bachmann DCC starter sets do give you a lot for the money. Tia Edge was wondering what happens to all the unsold stock that dealers, hobby shops have after they've had it so long. Well, the bottom line is it probably just sits there and collects dust, or they put it on sale so that it moves. So basically the way that it works is that the model railroad companies sell the products at a price that they can still make a profit from it, but it's a discounted price to the hobby shops. And the hobby shops then sell them to us. They give themselves a bit of a margin so they can still function, and that's basically how it works. Now, there are companies like Scale Trains that does a lot of direct-to-consumer pricing and things like that, but overall, that's how a lot of it works, and you have a lot of distributors. Like, for instance, Walthers is also a big distributor. There's a couple others out there that I can't remember offhand, but that's basically how it works. So the hobby shops are motivated to sell this stuff. So a lot of times if you go, the best example I can think of is Train World's for sale tab. That's where you can tell where they have stuff that they are trying to move. But that's basically what happens is they just put it on sale, and they'll keep advertising it and pushing it and try to get it sold. Is some stuff that they just keep on stock that isn't going to sell a ton, but it's something that really a hobby shop needs. So think of parts for that, like think of like couplers and wheels and things like that that aren't going to go flying off the shelves like a good piece of rolling stock or a locomotive, but you really need to keep as a hobby shop. So there are some things that dealerships, they'll just try and do them. They may try and sell them to someone who goes and does like used, or they like resale and that kind of stuff. But another option is they take it with them to shows as well. So Silver Badger 1 asks, what is my favorite brand of DCC decoder to add to your Kato locomotives that are DCC ready? And what is the easiest decoder to add to your Kato locomotives? No sound required. So a lot of times when I'm going no sound, I'll just go Digitrax. Digitrax has pretty much every Kato locomotive covered. Your other options for that are really going to be like ESU, sometimes NCE and TCS, but a lot of times it's going to be Digitrax or ESU are going to be your options for Kato. If you have one of the wide body Katos like an F unit or something, Soundtrax does make a sound decoder that can fit that. But overall, those are going to be your two main choices. And a lot of times I'll just go pick up a Digitrax decoder. I know you always hear the worst from everybody when it comes to different decoders. And so like when you talk Digitrax, sometimes you hear stories, but I've never really had issues with Digitrax decoders in terms of non-sound, and they're pretty easy to add. They're what are called drop-in decoders, and some of Kato's newer locomotives have done some slight changes to what they do, but the drop-in decoders are super easy to put in compared to like hand wiring and everything. You just got to kind of know what you're doing and make sure that you don't have any shorts, and you'll know immediately if you have a short because the locomotive won't run. Zach Boone 15 asked how I wired this layout right here, because T-Track does have a standard. So if you don't know, Kato wires for feeders are blue and white. So they have a standard that for when you go from outside, inside, inside, outside, so like that, the outside rails are blue and the middle rails are white wired. So I actually don't do that for my layout in here. I do blue, white, but this is not meant to be a T-Track setup that travels. I built this T-Track so that I could do changes to it and I could move. I know I'm not going to be in this house forever, so I figured let me build a modular layout and do that so that I can make changes when I want to, I can move it if I want to, and it's not going to be a royal pain. So that is why I built that this way. So, but I'm planning on building a set of modules that can travel. I'm part of an in-scale model railroad club that has a traveling T-Track setup, and I want to build some modules to go there. So that one I will do blue, white, blue. So that's what I do. This one's I consider a bespoke layout. The module behind me is pretty bespoke, and that's what I do is I just do blue, white for this one, but I'm doing blue, white, blue for my ones that are meant to connect with other ones. Isaiah Furrow 7414 asked, did I ever watch Shining Time Station? Absolutely, I watched Shining Time Station. Thomas was and still is cooler with the models. It's just really cool to watch that because you're just basically watching model trains go around. And I also love watching behind the scenes, me being into videography and having that be my day job. And yeah, I totally agree. I loved Shining Time Station as a kid. And yes, Thomas was cooler when it was models. And my kids actually prefer the older Thomases to the newer ones, which I'm like, all right. So, but by the way, if you want to watch those now, they do have them on Prime, and you can also usually find all of them on YouTube. So yeah, RVA 1954 asked, in a previous video, I mentioned a virtual layout, and I was going to look into that, and he wants to hear more about that. I am. That's just going to take me a little while to do. I have to get up to speed on the program and probably build a few things and just kind of figure out how it is. But yes, I want to check that out because I would love to build a layout that's way bigger than this, or a setup that's way bigger than this, and I just don't have the space for it, and I think that's a way to do it. Lucky Strike 33T asked if I've gotten to run my steam engines on my layout and how they perform on the new rails. Absolutely, yeah, I actually run my steam engines all the time. So one thing that I do on a certain day of the week when my daughter has dance and my wife takes her to dance is my son and I run trains in here, and he gets to pick whatever he wants. And a lot of times he prefers the steam engine. So, and he says, I want to run this steam engine, I want to run that steam engine. So my steam engines actually get a fairly good workout here, and none of them are performing poorly. I know that we can have a lot of different things like that, but none of them are performing poorly. Mr. Business says, have I ever considered a non-US themed layout? It says beside the US, he does European, Japanese, and China railways. And so what I have really thought about doing, there's two that I've really thought about doing. One, well, I'll say three, because one is I have Kato Unitrack, and I've just thought about getting some Japanese trains to go on this, because Kato obviously is Japanese and makes a ton of those. Ones that I really love abroad are, I love European narrow gauge. They look great, and I absolutely love them. I have them on my garden railroad. I think I have maybe one US prototype, the rest is European because it's all LGB. And the other one that I would actually be interested in running more is Australian, and particularly those coal and ore trains, those super long trains. That would be something that I'd be willing to try. Broadway Limited actually released, I think when they did the AC6000, they did the BHP iron ore paint scheme. So Broadway Limited's actually made it on an Australian locomotive. So that's another one that I would consider. So Japanese, just because I have Kato. European narrow gauges I really like, and Australian, some of the big coal and ore trains. Oscar Lopez Castillo 269 asks if I prefer CTC on N-scale or doing it locally at Track Command. So what I do is, my layout's really not big enough to utilize CTC in a fun way at all. If I held a bigger layout, which I actually am designing my dream layout, though I may never build it, I'm going to want to be able to do CTC, but I also want to be able to kind of do it dual, where I can control it locally and remotely. So I just have to figure out exactly how to do that. But if I could do CTC, I absolutely would. If otherwise, I just have a lot of buttons on my track, and this is actually kind of what I prefer, because a lot of times it's just me operating and I'm just doing one little section of my layout. Southern Belt LLC says, back in my videos with the Twin Valley Railroad, I did a couple ways for easily lighting up buildings on the layout. And I've done lighting for T-Track modules, but how would I do that? And actually, I did a video a while back on the module that's like right over there, where I used a setup from Dioramo. And Dioramo has a bunch of lighting options, just a ton. They're compatible with Woodland Scenics Just Plug, and they're nice and compact, and they're fairly easy to put in there. And they have all the controls you need. I'm going to link them in the description below. But yes, Dioramo is what I do. I have them set up in here, and I have them set up in a couple other places. Like, I'll have to pop off the modules here to be able to do that. That's a project coming down the road. But yeah, that's what I would do, is something like Dioramo or Just Plug. I like Dioramo. Scurbs7755 says, is there anyone who makes the HO scale equivalent to the N-scale modules that I use for this? So there is HO scale T-Track, because Kato Unitrack does exist in HO scale. And I think Clawdikes makes it. If it does, I'll say yes or no right here. I think they make it. I'm not quite sure. But yes, there is a T-Track, there's an HO scale T-Track standard, kind of the way that there's a Fremo N standard in addition to the HO one. So you can find that. They're way bigger modules, but yes, HO scale, there are HO scale T-Track modules. Thomas L. Durbin asks if I am doing all body mount couplers or in the process of switching, and do I use NMRA standards for car weight? So quickly on the NMRA standards, I do not yet. It is something that I want to do. I just literally have not had the time to do it. And when I get to it, I'm going to do a project on it, but I have several hundred pieces of rolling stock, and that's a little bit overwhelming for my ADD brain. And for the body mounted coupler question, I am in the process of switching couplers. Whenever I put a new coupler, if I have to replace something on there, I put a body mounted coupler on there. And that is because body mounted couplers do better in tighter turns, especially on like 6-axle diesels and things like that. A lot of times the truck mounted couplers on, say, like an 11-inch radius and tighter, the big 6-axle diesels can push the truck off the tracks for the truck mounted couplers, and body mounted couplers just do better with that. So yes, I'm going to switch to body mounted couplers eventually for all of my rolling stock, but that is a very, very long way off. Okay, if you want to get your questions answered in the next Q&A, you can do that in the comments below. That's going to be in the end of January 2026. Wow, that's a long way off. I cannot believe that. So go ahead and get those in. Got a little bit more time to get them in, and I may do a longer Q&A session because of that. But yeah, get those in so that I can start getting that produced. I've got a lot of stuff going on at Christmas, so I'm trying to get all my videos produced here before. So get those questions in hopefully in the next 2 weeks. So thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.